David Lynch has died. It was announced yesterday on January 16th, 2025. Today is the 17th of 2025. And there's a lot to unpack from it. A lot of things that I think aren't immediate on people's minds, but as the days roll on, we're going to think about and realize and contemplate the implications. My name is Christopher Moonlight. Welcome to my channel. Usually I do interviews or tutorials or just give my thoughts on things. But today, well, I guess I'm still giving my thoughts on things, but David Lynch was one of the big inspirations in my life as a director. And I'll talk a little bit about that, and I'll talk a little bit about how I feel that David Lynch's death didn't need to happen just yet, and that it is a result of neglect, not from his family, but from the industry that makes movies that we love and that David Lynch loved. And it is because we neglected that industry that David Lynch is not here with us any longer. I'm not saying it's 100% the reason. David Lynch was a lifelong smoker, and it is very much almost a foregone conclusion that it was his emphysema that got him. In a recent interview, he said he can't get up and go anywhere in the house without his oxygen. And again, yes, smoking is not good for you, but it is something that David Lynch loved. He talked about loving smoking. But again, it's not the end all be all. I really want to address this, and I'm going to try and do it methodically. Hopefully the sound of that plane going overhead isn't too loud. I will say a few things before I really get into it. One, I woke up this morning to a beautiful rainbow, a morning rainbow. The sun was rising, and there was such a pink hue across everything that it was dreamlike. That pink sunrise where the light isn't just in the sky but casts across everything, the houses, the cars, the windows, creating a very surreal feeling. And then when I looked out a certain window to the west, there was a rainbow, a morning rainbow. It's very rare. I personally like to see meaning in everything. I think we need to pay attention to the world around us. And so I was very glad to see that rainbow, especially since David Lynch has been on my mind. So I will talk about what David Lynch means to me as a director first, because my movie, The Quantum Terror, which I had hoped I could give him a copy of at some point, because it was his work was such an inspiration and influence on The Quantum Terror, but not quite in the way that you would think, and I'll talk about that as well. But I first really became aware of David Lynch in my early 20s, maybe at 20 years old. I had just moved out of my father's house. I was living in an apartment with a couple of roommates, and I had been aware of Twin Peaks. I hadn't really watched it, but I came across a copy of Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. Yes, that was my introduction to David Lynch as a name, as a director. I had seen The Elephant Man before when I was younger. I kind of thought of it as, in my naivete as a kid, I thought it was an older movie than it was because it was in black and white, and thought of it as a historical movie. The impact of the directing style, it was lost on me at the time. And like I said, I was a kid. I wasn't really paying attention to that sort of thing. I was into Star Wars and Star Trek and Indiana Jones and, all stuff that I still love. But when I came across Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, it was the first time I really understood that a movie could be more than the normal Hollywood fare, what I was used to. And just the way that the storytelling went, I felt so deeply for the characters. Without knowing who they were, I hadn't watched the television series yet, so I wasn't aware that actors had been replaced or that Laura Palmer was. I knew that this was the story of her death. I remember who killed Laura Palmer, but I didn't know who James was, and I was coming in completely cold, and I was instantly mesmerized by these characters. I didn't realize that Kiefer Sutherland and blocking on his name, Chris Isaac, weren't part of the normal series. I was, didn't realize that David Bowie was a new entry, and so it was really quite an experience, and I didn't know what was going on. I mean, yes, I got the sense of what was going on, but at the same time, I didn't, you know, without the context, and even the fans are, not 100% have all the context. I felt so deeply, and I was mesmerized by the way that the storytelling was told, just in such an unconventional way, yet it made sense. And I don't mean I understand what it all means. I mean that I could empathize. I could feel engrossed like a fly on the wall, overhearing a conversation from people that I don't know, but instantly being interested and drawn in to the very end, and then asking myself, what did it all mean? But not just in a way of like, can you explain this to me? But also in a sense of, I felt that these characters were people that I wanted to know what they went through and why it happened, and what would it come to, what would happen next, not just in terms of, the next installment, but how would this affect them? These characters would never be the same again. There was no coming back from what they had been through. And you did get a sense that Laura Palmer was still out there in some form, which when you see Twin Peaks The Return, there's more to that as well. But you felt like Twin Peaks was a place that these events would just keep going on and on. There was no conclusion. Life goes on. If somebody dies, the rest go on, and again, you feel drawn in. You feel like these people, you like these people, you want them to not suffer needlessly, even though you feel like there's definitely needless suffering going on in Twin Peaks. And anyway, I could go on about how David Lynch really got a sense of people reaching for things that are bad for them, and getting burned, and they keep doing it again and again, even though there's good inside of them. And from there, not long after that, Lost Highway was in the theaters, and I knew it was David Lynch, and it was like, I got to go see this. And again, same thing. We may not know in a very clear-cut way what's going on. There's no explanations, but you're drawn in, and you understand the characters. Even though you don't understand what's happening, you understand that these characters are behaving in ways that they make sense, because they're how we would react, or maybe not how we would react, but in the context, that a person is going to react to their surroundings, no matter how bizarre, no matter how strange. They're going to still try and go on with their lives. And David Lynch really, again, hit the ball out of the park there. Oh, I should say, by the way, I was, as a child, a big fan of the Dune movie. But again, I wasn't aware of it in terms of David Lynch being the director. It was just a sci-fi movie that, along with Star Trek and Star Wars and other things that I loved as a kid that people don't really remember, like Galaxy of Terror, Battle Beyond the Stars. What else? Well, doesn't matter. There were plenty of sci-fi movies that people don't remember now, but again, going back and revisiting Dune, even though there are problems with Dune as a movie in terms of the story pacing and the edit, that's because they were taken away from David Lynch. But what I love about Dune is that it still is a David Lynch movie. No matter what you do to it, the essence of who David Lynch is as an artist and a director still remains with it. And as a result, it's still a wonderful movie. I love it. And so I guess from there, like I said, I learned a lot from David Lynch, even though The Quantum Terror is out there for people to watch, and they would probably look at it and go, oh, he's influenced by the weirdness. No, the weirdness came from within myself, actually. It's of course, there are a lot of influences. I do enjoy avant-garde stuff. I enjoy surrealist artwork. But I actually wasn't trying to imitate David Lynch's weirdness. What I was trying to do was I was trying to channel David Lynch's understanding of people. Through David Lynch, I actually learned a lot about psychology. And it's funny because a lot of psychologists will reference David Lynch movies and use them as examples of teaching psychology. And so, through David Lynch, I discovered Carl Jung. Anyway, I don't want to go off on a tangent in that direction, but really his directing style, his working with actors, was really what I tried to emulate in The Quantum Terror. So when you watch the actors and you see the timing of how they talk and how I edited around them, that's very much a huge, huge influence from David Lynch in there. That's where David Lynch's influence comes from. I've learned a lot from other directors: Ridley Scott, James Cameron, Steven Spielberg. The Italian spaghetti westerns, the Japanese samurai films, animation. I'm a huge animation fan. But when it comes to directing actors and handling dialogue, David Lynch is always a masterclass. So anyway, you probably saw the title of this video and wondered, what does that mean? And why do I think that David Lynch died from neglect? Well, I mean that both symbolically and literally. At the moment, you may know, if you see my channel, I have been embracing AI, much to the chagrin of a lot of people who feel like AI can't be art. Well, first of all, that's kind of what would you call that? A misleading statement. AI can't be art, implying that the AI is somehow incapable of producing anything of artistic value. Well, when you look at it that way, that's like saying a hammer is incapable of producing a house. And that would be true. But that's not the point of a hammer. The point of the hammer is that a artisan, a craftsman, can pick it up and use it to build any number of things that his imagination can conjure. And so a hammer is a tool, and AI is a tool as well. I'm not here to go into all the points about AI. I've made those in other videos, but the reason that I bring it up is because I have been given a new tool. And as a human being with an imagination and a vision, I am able to wield that tool and use it in my toolkit of other tools to create movies and do it independently. David Lynch picked up the digital camera, and I remember there was a documentary hosted by Keanu Reeves called Side by Side, where Keanu asked him, David, are you done with film? And David Lynch said, well, don't quote me on it, Keanu, but I think I am. Now, later on, I believe Twin Peaks: The Return was shot on film, which is wonderful. Again, just because you have new tools, it doesn't mean you need to abandon your old tools. You can use them together. But David Lynch was really, he wanted to tell his story any way he could. And if a piece of new technology like a digital camera could help him, even if it was to the chagrin of lesser directors who thought that shooting on film made it a more pure art form, well, he was going to do it. He was going to tell his story any way he could. And he wouldn't, there's a saying I came across not too long ago, and forgive me, I don't know who said it, I can't remember, but it was perfection is procrastination masquerading as quality control. Yes, all these tools have their flaws, and some tools might produce things better than others. But David Lynch, he wanted to tell his story, and he couldn't always afford film. And I definitely couldn't afford film, just like I couldn't afford a big budget special effects department to realize my vision. Well, in the indie space, usually the answer to that was scale back your vision. Well, David Lynch has shown us that we don't have all the time in the world to wait for permission to realize the vision we have. So, yes, we will accept less and work with what we can get our hands on, but now technology has allowed us to get our hands on things that are really going to launch us ahead of the game. And I think, as a result, people in Hollywood, lesser creators, people with limited vision, and I do say that with a little bit of contempt because I have experienced them, want to bemoan it, not because they have any real argument against it, but because now they have to contend with people outside of the industry making their own way, which David Lynch always did. Hollywood wasn't going to greenlight his movies most of the time. They did sometimes, and most of the times they lost money on it. But David Lynch always found a way, and now, with his passing, we feel it. He is among the last of the truly visionary directors who strove to be an artist. We don't have any directors like that now, no new directors. And don't give me Denis Villeneuve or Robert Ayers. These people are mid at their best. I'm sorry, but they are. We need to stop revering them, because what we're doing is we're searching for those people, but they're not out there, at least not in Hollywood. They're in the independent sphere. But we're searching for them, and when we find somebody that kind of looks like it, we put them up on a pedestal, even though they really haven't earned it yet. It's like Blade Runner 2049. Come on, that movie made no sense, and it didn't look as beautiful as what Ridley Scott had done. It was just an imitation, and a pale one at that. The new Doom movie, I absolutely hated it. It was insulting to the audience's intelligence, but the audience cheered for it not because they're not intelligent, but because they're desperate for something that is meaningful. And that's really what I believe about art, is art should be meaningful in a way. And what makes it meaningful? That it touches something inside of us that makes us feel like we're not alone. It's usually something useful, and I don't mean useful in an instructional way, but when you experience a story through a character and you understand that character, what they're going through, you do so because there's something in yourself that is able to relate to it. And through the characters, through the events in the movie, you are able to do things, think about things, experience things that might be dangerous or forbidden, generally a bad idea. Movies and most stories are full of bad ideas. But what we get to do through those stories is play them out in a way that's safe. That's why it's important that we don't censor them, because they're a safe place to play around with dangerous or bad ideas, or sometimes a good idea. Because most ideas, when executed in real life, can be dangerous, but if they work, they pay off in wonderful ways. If they don't work, you get catastrophe. And so you create stories, and people may go, why would you tell that story? You know, I hate this idea that some horrible things will happen in a movie and you go, well, that director must be a horrible person. It's like, no. They're playing out bad ideas or horrible ideas, which we all have. Every human being has bad ideas. They're playing them out and seeing what happens and crafting a narrative around it. Because if you think about these ideas for long enough and you start to visualize them in, say, a movie, you start to understand the direction they could go. And again, that may not always be correct, but then the audience gets to experience it, and they start to think about, what if it went a different way? Or what if they were in that situation? And it helps them to play out these ideas. So if something similar comes up in real life, they've already seen the characters get burned. They've already been burned in their own imaginations in different ways, but they may be able to make a better choice. Now, we have a Hollywood who feels like these are not exercises in thought, exercises in ideas, but platforms for their, what would you call it? Some people use the word ideology, but really, when you get when you give the ability to tell stories to people who are arrogant, narcissistic, and so sure of their worldview that they feel that they cannot be wrong, then you get propaganda. And that's what these people think stories are. They think they're platforms for their ideas and not exercises in thought. And there is a difference. An idea that you're so sure of is folly. So again and again, we get these terrible movies because they're not stories, they're lectures. They're lectures from people who think they know better than you, and they don't. These people are, again, narcissistic. They are negligent in their thinking, because once you're sure you're right, then any other idea, any other possibility, scenario is vetoed. And this is what killed David Lynch. Because yes, David Lynch was a lifelong smoker and he had emphysema. But what are we seeing right now in Hollywood? Well, let's backtrack a little bit. We have a union that has been overrun by, again, limited vision thinkers. who can't see past their own paycheck. They have made choice after choice to subvert art in the name of propaganda, which has caused the audiences to go away. And because the audiences have gone away, they've taken their money with them, and so there's no money to make more of their propaganda. But did they go, hey, maybe we should self-reflect and make changes so that the audience comes back? No. Their only idea was to double down on they're right about everything and attack the audience. So the audience stayed away. And then the studios went, hey, these movies aren't making any money. We need to change direction. And through the guilds, a lot of these people, they put the pressure on to keep making this stuff. And the studios were terrified. They had lost control of their own industry. And so when the guilds asked for a raise, even though there was no money, the studios had no choice but to shut down a bunch of productions. So the few people who did have jobs still have money, but now most people are just out of a job. Out of a job means less tax money for the California government. But the California government, who is elected by these same people making the bad choices about the unions, they just decided to tax more and do less, and they neglected their state, and now it's on fire. And I've talked to a lot of people in California because, hey, guess what? I used to live there. I moved there when I was 6 years old, 1980. 1980 was when we got the house, but still lived in England. So I think 1982 was when we were finally moved over there for good. I grew up in California. What a wonderful place to grow up, to be a teenager, especially when I got a car, to be able to drive to Malibu Beach. You know, we were what I would call lower middle class where we were, but we could go to Malibu, we could go to the mountains, we could go to the desert, we could go anywhere. Universal Studios was there. You know, I didn't get to go very often, but what a special treat when I did. Another place that inspired me to be a filmmaker. It was a gorgeous place, and David Lynch loved it. And the greed and the narcissism and the neglect has caused its economy to collapse, and for Rome to literally burn. So much has been lost. Not only has property been lost and lives have been lost, but our culture there has been lost. Hollywood and California, Southern California specifically, had a culture. It wasn't a culture of gentrification. It wasn't full of just Walmarts and McDonald's. Beachside food shacks, funky little stores, from, Melrose in Hollywood in the 90s was amazing. Galleries, old houses, museums. Our culture burned, and David Lynch is part of that culture. And that is what David Lynch represented as a filmmaker. That kind of culture. Not this rubber-stamped, formulaic Walmart of movie making. And that's the thing. All this stuff is burned down. It's not going to be replaced with the same thing. It's going to be replaced with Walgreens and CVS and more McDonald's, more Chick-fil-A, more, Targets and honestly, there's nothing wrong with those things, but we can't exist with just those things. Man cannot live by bread alone. David Lynch knew that. And if you neglect enough, it burns. it crumbles, it collapses. That's why Hollywood is dead. That's why the state is on fire. And what do you get when you fill the air with the smoke of a burning Rome and you cross it with a man with emphysema? You can't tell me that a man with emphysema, a beautiful artist like David Lynch, who could not move around in his home without an oxygen tank, was going to fare well during these fires. So I think David Lynch is another victim of the fire. But the fire is emblematic of the neglect that California and Hollywood have been subject to for years. And it makes me sick to see the people responsible now try and dodge, try and shift blame to the people who were warning them the whole time, myself included. I left California and moved to Texas in 2012 because I could not afford to provide for my family anymore, and I wasn't going to be subjected to Hollywood people who would tell me how I was supposed to make my movie, that I would have to beg for permission to make my movie, and that would change my movie, change my story, and take all the money. What was the point? So I came to Texas and I made The Quantum Terror, and now I'm making my second film, Escape from Planet Omega 12. And it is this man's inspiration, this man's influence that helped me to do that. But this man loved Hollywood. He loved old Hollywood. He loved California, just like I did. Fortunately, he got to stay. Unfortunately, he got to stay. Like I said, the fire is emblematic of the neglect. The same people responsible for the fire are the same people responsible for the collapse of Hollywood. And they're the same people trying to deflect and dodge, shift blame, and not be accountable. They're disgusting. And I actually believe, like I said, David Lynch could have had a little more time. Maybe not to make his art, maybe just to enjoy the world around him. But the irresponsibility, the arrogance, the narcissism, the neglect took him off this earth. And I'm not going to forget that. I'm going to try not to be bitter and resentful, because those things lead to evil in ourselves. And like I said, I loved David Lynch, as a personality, as a persona, as an artist. I don't know who he was as a man. Only the people close to him did, and honestly, I'm not going to assume or judge. I think David Lynch himself tried not to be judgmental, although he was a lot more pragmatic than I think a lot of people want to believe. I think, he really thought about life and beauty, and he loved people. He was very good with people. So I hope David Lynch has gone on to meet God, and I hope he's accepted into heaven. I think he may be. He is weird and wonderful, and not without sin, like all of us, but, So I guess I could go on, but I just want to say that this one hit home for me, and it doesn't, it's not a singularity. A lot of things led to this. We need to take a lesson from this. David Lynch represents what we should be striving for artistically. And the fact that it is like I said, the things I've already talked about that I feel have led to him dying when he did. That's that's something we should think about moving forward, because I think the only way back is through. Anyway, I will end on this. One of my favorite things to do, for those who actually know who David Lynch is, because a lot of times I'll talk about David Lynch and a lot of people just go, who? Which again is a shame, because I think it represents the lack of American culture, or the refusal to see American culture, which has led to a lot of young people not knowing who David Lynch is or knowing much about their past. A lot of young people don't know like movies past 10 years ago. They think, like, what's your favorite movie? Oh, Transformers. Boy, what a diet. We got to show these kids that there's more sustenance out there. But anyway, for those who know who David Lynch is, one of my favorite things to do for them was, I think I do a pretty good David Lynch impersonation. So I'll just say, this is David Lynch wishing you blue skies and golden sunshine. I can usually do better. I think I'm just still upset. But if you've made it this far, thank you very much. I just want to say this. Let's all pour one out for David Lynch. Thanks for watching. Bye.